if you break a bone, an X-ray shows a clean, jagged white line. It's totally binary. It's broken or it's not broken.
Right.
And we really like to think about death in the exact same way, as a binary switch. Like one moment you are here, the lights go out and you're just gone.
Which is how we've always looked at it, yeah.
But, I mean, what if we have been looking at this entirely wrong? Like, what if biological death isn't an ending at all, but a catastrophic failure of a quantum hard drive?
Well, I mean, that reframes the ultimate unknown, right? From a terrifying void into a highly specific mechanical process.
Right.
If we strip away all the mystical assumptions, we are literally left with the hard physics of what happens when a biological machine can no longer sustain a quantum state.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to another custom-tailored deep dive designed specifically for you, the learner, the one who wants to bypass the fluff and get straight to the aha moments. Today, we are completely reframing the ultimate human mystery. We're diving into this incredibly thought-provoking piece published on Substack back on May 16th, 2026. The writer is known as Spiral Seeker, and the piece is titled Death as a Computational Event.
It's a fascinating read.
It really is. And the mission here today is to look at biological death through the rigorous lens of quantum physics, neurobiology, and computational theory. We want to connect the absolute microscopic workings of the human brain to the macroscopic fundamental structure of the universe itself.
Yeah, and to even begin to wrap our heads around this computational model of death, we really have to actively dismantle the traditional frameworks we use to understand consciousness.
The false binary, right?
Right, the false binary. Every human culture operates on a completely unexamined assumption regarding the end of life. The author points out that we are universally trapped in this.
Yeah, the idea that it's either a soul floating off to the clouds or it's just nothingness, like the great delete button.
Exactly. Let's look at both sides of that binary for a second. On one hand, you have the theological approach. That relies on a dualism, where a non-physical essence simply detaches from the body and, goes to a designated ethereal location.
Like heaven or whatever.
Right. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the staunch materialist view, which absolutely dominates modern biology. The materialist asserts that you are nothing more than electrical impulses in a meat computer.
A computer, yeah.
And when the blood flow stops, well, the meat rots, the electricity halts, and the program is permanently deleted. Oblivion.
It's bleak. But, I mean, they both treat consciousness like an anomaly. Religion treats it like magic, and materialism treats it like a light bulb that just gets smashed.
That's a great way to put it.
But Spiral Seeker is arguing that both paradigms fundamentally misunderstand what consciousness actually is in a purely physical sense.
Right.
Like, what if consciousness is a literal physical process of quantum computations?
And if we accept that premise, then biological death isn't a magical transition.
No.
And it certainly isn't a deletion. It is simply a hardware failure.
Right.
Bringing foundational physics into this is so crucial. We need to look at the human body as a substrate.
Okay, let's define substrate for everyone.
Sure. So in computing and chemistry, a substrate is simply the underlying physical medium in which a process or reaction occurs. Like a silicon wafer is a substrate for a microchip.
Got it.
So the squishy, warm biological tissue of your brain is the substrate that supports the computational process of your consciousness.
So think about your own brain right now as you listen to this. Your heart is pumping, oxygen is crossing the blood-brain barrier. You are powering a machine.
You are. And when that biological medium loses its energy, when the heart inevitably stops, it can no longer sustain the highly specific electromagnetic and quantum states required to keep that computation running.
The hardware fails.
The hardware has failed. But what the materialist model misses, and this is key, is that a hardware failure does not equate to the annihilation of the data that was being processed.
Oh, this makes me think of an everyday nightmare. Let me try this analogy. You're working on your laptop. You have a massive, unsaved 3D rendering going.
A absolute worse.
Right, the fans are whirring, the CPU's running hot, and you accidentally knock a cup of coffee right onto the motherboard.
Total panic.
Total panic. The screen goes black, the physical machine is dead, but the data it was processing in that exact second, the electrical charges, the heat, the specific arrangement of information, doesn't magically teleport to a literal cloud in the sky.
No, of course not.
Nor does it just blink out of existence defying the laws of physics. The energy disperses. The heat dissipates into the air of your living room. The electrical charge grounds out into the depths.
Exactly.
The data is lost to you, the user, but the fundamental energy and information that constituted that computing moment are not annihilated from the universe.
This is exactly where the unbreakable rule of thermodynamics comes in. The first law of thermodynamics states that in a closed system, and modern physics treats the universe as the ultimate closed system, energy and information are strictly conserved.
Conserved, meaning they can't be deleted.
Right. They do not vanish. They transform. They change state.
So if consciousness is a highly complex state of quantum information being processed by the biological hardware of the brain, the destruction of the hardware just means the information must disperse. It literally cannot be permanently deleted from reality.
The physics mandate conservation. The destruction of the biological substrate just forces a state change in the information.
Okay, hold on. I need to push back here because we are talking about the brain like it's a quantum computer.
We are.
But quantum computers, like the ones IBM and Google build, I mean, they have to be isolated in these massive multi-million-dollar sub-zero freezers just to protect the qubits, right?
Right. They need absolute zero temperatures.
Exactly. The human brain is a wet, messy, 98-degree meat sack. So how on earth is quantum data surviving in there without getting instantly scrambled?
Yeah, that apparent contradiction is exactly why the scientific community struggled with these ideas for decades. It's a huge hurdle.
It seems impossible.
But it transitions us perfectly into the mechanics of how this biological hardware actually operates while we are alive. To explain how a warm, wet brain can sustain delicate quantum states, the author relies on a framework called Orchestrated Objective Reduction.
Or Orch-OR.
Yes, Orch-OR.
Let's really dig into this, because it's the foundation for everything that follows. This theory didn't just come out of nowhere. It came from Roger Penrose, right? The Nobel-winning physicist who worked with Stephen Hawking on black holes.
Yes, Sir Roger Penrose. And he approached this not as a biologist, but as a mathematical physicist.
Okay.
He looked at human consciousness and realized that humans can understand mathematical truths that, according to Gödel's incompleteness theorems, an algorithmic classical computer simply cannot prove.
So we aren't just calculators.
Right. Penrose deduced that consciousness cannot be purely algorithmic. It cannot be just a classical computer of ones and zeros. There had to be a non-computable element.
A leap of intuition, almost.
Exactly. And the only place in physics where non-computable, non-deterministic events occur is in the collapse of the quantum wave function.
But Penrose had a huge problem with this, didn't he? He had the math, but he didn't know biology.
He had no idea.
He didn't know where in the brain this quantum collapse could possibly happen without being totally destroyed by the heat and noise of the human body.
Until an anesthesiologist named Stuart Hameroff reached out to him. Hameroff brought the missing biological puzzle piece.
And what was that?
The microtubule.
The microtubule. Okay, so think about the neurons inside your head right now. They aren't just empty balloons filled with jelly. They have a skeleton, right?
They have a highly complex cytoskeleton, yeah. Inside your neurons are these microscopic cylindrical structures called microtubules.
And what do they do?
Well, they're made of proteins called tubulin, and they form a remarkably ordered, repeating crystalline lattice. They transport materials around the cell, sure, but their structural symmetry is mathematically astonishing.
So Hameroff sees these and thinks what?
Hameroff suggested to Penrose that these microtubules are the actual quantum processors of the brain.
Wow. Okay, let's make sure we are crystal clear on how these processors work. In your standard laptop, a bit of information is binary. It's a 1 or a 0. An electrical gate is open or closed.
Right, classical computing.
But a quantum bit of qubit can exist in a superposition, meaning it exists as a probability wave representing both 1 and 0 at the exact same time.
Yes.
And it stays in that wave state until it interacts with the environment, at which point it collapses into a definite state.
Spot on. In the Orch-OR model, millions of these quantum superpositions are occurring simultaneously within the hydrophobic, dry pockets of the microtubular lattice inside your neurons.
So inside these tiny dry pockets, it's shielded from the wet brain.
Exactly. And when these superpositions reach a certain critical threshold of mass, energy, and time, they undergo an orchestrated, unified collapse.
So it's not random, it's orchestrated.
Orchestrated by the biological structure of the microtubules. And here is the core premise. Each one of those discrete, orchestrated quantum collapse events constitutes a single, unified moment of conscious experience.
A now.
A now. Your continuous flowing experience of reality, hearing my voice, feeling the chair beneath you, is actually a rapid-fire sequence of millions of these quantum collapse events stringing together.
So what does this all mean? Going back to my challenge.
Yeah.
Quantum states are incredibly fragile. Physicists call it decoherence.
Yes, decoherence.
If a qubit gets too warm or bumps into a stray molecule, the superposition collapses prematurely. The data turns into random noise. So how is the brain preventing decoherence at 98.6 degrees?
This is where we see the absolute genius of evolutionary biology. The living cell isn't just a container for these microtubules.
Right.
The entire biological apparatus acts as a sophisticated, relentless biological quantum error correction system.
A biological error correction system. That's a wild concept.
It is. Your body is expending a staggering amount of energy right now just to maintain this system. Every cell uses a molecule called ATP adenosine triphosphate.
The fundamental energy currency of life.
Exactly. Your mitochondria are churning out ATP so your cells can regulate their exact internal temperature. They use it to power ion pumps, which maintain precise electrical gradients across the cell membranes.
So they are constantly pumping stuff in and out.
They're constantly pumping sodium and potassium ions in and out to keep the electrical charge absolutely perfect.
Okay, let me try an analogy here. It's like you're trying to build a delicate, towering house of cards in the middle of a hurricane.
I like that.
The quantum superpositions inside the microtubules are the playing cards. The warm, chaotic, noisy environment of the brain, the blood, the heat, the movement, that is the hurricane.
Right.
If that wind hits the cards, they instantly scatter into random noise.
Yeah.
The computation is ruined.
But the brain's ATP metabolism, the ion pumps, the thermal regulation, those are the thick stone walls you've built around your house of cards.
They block the wind.
They block the wind. They create an insulated, shielded environment. The biological body is the fortress wall. It keeps those incredibly delicate superpositions isolated and coherent just long enough for the orchestrated part of orchestrated objective reduction to happen.
And this error correction system is basically constantly running, right?
Constantly. It's fixing micro leaks in the wall, pumping out the thermal noise, ensuring the quantum isolation remains totally intact.
And there is actual observable proof of this, isn't there? You mentioned Hameroff was an anesthesiologist.
Yes, this is perhaps the most compelling empirical evidence for Orch-OR. How do anesthetics actually turn off your consciousness when you go in for surgery?
Yeah, how do they? Because I always assumed we knew.
For a long time, medical science didn't actually know. We knew the chemical put you to sleep, but not the exact physical mechanism. Hameroff and others discovered that anesthetic gases literally bind to the tiny hydrophobic pockets inside the tubulin proteins of the microtubules.
Wow, they slide right into the quantum processors.
They slide right in and alter the electron resonance. They basically dampen the quantum dipole oscillations without stopping the classical electrical firing of the rest of the brain.
Oh, that's wild. So the brain is still functionally alive.
Yes, still regulating breathing and heart rate, but the quantum superpositions are suppressed, and the moment those quantum vibrations stop, consciousness vanishes.
So consciousness relies entirely on that error correction system keeping the quantum states stable.
Exactly.
Okay, that establishes the baseline. That is the hardware operating as intended. But Spiral Seeker's article is about death. So if the brain is this fragile house of cards, then what happens when the wind finally blows it down? Like, what is the mechanical sequence of events when that biological fortress fails?
The model provides a mathematically consistent, though highly intense, picture of biological death. Death is simply the systematic, catastrophic failure of the cellular error correction system.
Let's trace the timeline. Say, the heart stops beating, cardiac arrest. Blood pressure drops to 0.
The immediate consequence is hypoxia. Oxygen stops reaching the brain cells. And without oxygen, the mitochondria inside your cells can no longer manufacture ATP. The energy currency is instantly depleted.
The power grid goes down.
The power grid totally fails. And without ATP, those ion pumps on the cell membranes, the ones constantly bailing out water to keep the ship afloat, they just freeze. The ionic gradients begin to collapse.
And then what happens?
Calcium ions flood into the cell, which is highly toxic in large amounts. The thermal regulation plummets.
So the walls of the fortress are crumbling.
The walls are breached entirely. And without this biological shield, the microtubular lattice is suddenly exposed to the raw, chaotic thermal noise of the dying brain. The environment crashes in.
The hurricane hits the house of cards.
Yes. In quantum mechanics, this uncontrolled, violently noisy interaction with the environment results in what we call forced decoherence.
It's forced decoherence, meaning the delicate qubits, those probability waves of both 1 and 0, can no longer sustain their superposition.
They are forced to resolve instantly.
They just collapse.
They collapse. But the critical element here is the sheer scale of the event. We are not talking about a gentle fading of the light. It is a massively parallel collapse event.
Parallel meaning everywhere at once.
Exactly. Every single superposition state across your entire brain that was contributing to your ongoing computation of consciousness, billions of them, are exposed to the thermal noise simultaneously. They're all forced to collapse and resolve at the exact same time.
Wait, if all these quantum states collapse at the exact same time, what does the user, the dying person, actually experience in that split second?
That's the big question.
I mean, if consciousness is the collapse of these states and suddenly billions of them collapse at once, does the brain just blue screen? Like, what is the phenomenological correlate of this massive physical crash?
Well, the phenomenological correlate, meaning what this physical mechanism actually feels like from the first-person perspective of the dying subject, is described mathematically as an explosive compression of conscious experience.
Explosive compression.
Yes. If a normal waking moment is a rhythmic, regulated sequence of 1,000,000 quantum collapses per second, a forced decoherence forces all remaining potential experience to resolve instantly.
Oh, wow. So it feels like an immense, overwhelming volume of data compressed into a vanishingly small interval of external time.
Precisely. Externally, to the doctor watching the heart monitor, it takes a few seconds. Internally, subjectively, it would feel like an eternity.
Which leads us directly into the chemical trigger that accompanies this collapse. Because the brain doesn't just passively let the walls fall, it reacts.
It does.
It brings us to the brain's astonishing evolved response to impending hardware failure, the endogenous DMT dump.
This is where neurochemistry and quantum physics align beautifully in the author's framework.
Yeah, let's talk about DMT.
So DMT, or N,N-dimethyltryptamine, is famously known as one of the most powerful psychedelic compounds on the planet. When synthesized and consumed, it produces profound experiences.
Like traversing geometric dimensions, encountering autonomous entities, and experiencing severe time dilation.
Exactly. But what is vital here is that DMT is endogenous. The human body manufactures it natively. We find the enzymes to create it in the pineal gland and heavily in certain lung tissues.
And the timing of its release is the smoking gun here, isn't it?
It really is.
The Substack piece references studies. Specifically, there was landmark research done on rat models at the University of Michigan, showing that at the exact moment of cardiac arrest, there is a massive, unprecedented spike in brain DMT levels.
Right. And simultaneously, there's a massive surge in high-frequency gamma brainwaves.
So the hardware is dying, but the software is spiking.
Yes. Traditional materialist sciences often dismiss this surge. They view it as a random neurochemical accident. They think, the cells are dying, their membranes are bursting, so random neurotransmitters just leak out, causing a final meaningless hallucination as the lights go out.
But from the computational perspective of the Orch-OR model, this DMT surge is not a random leak at all.
No, it is a highly specific, evolved mechanism. It is the biological hardware's final emergency protocol.
But why? I mean, why would the brain trigger a psychedelic flood as the cellular fortress is collapsing? What is the computational purpose of dumping DMT onto the quantum processors?
Well, to understand the purpose, we must look at what DMT actually does to the neural architecture. When a brain is flooded with tryptamines, one of the primary functional results is the suppression of what neuroscientists call the default mode network, or DMN.
The default mode network. Okay, let's make sure everyone understands this, because the DMN essentially dictates how we experience being human. It's the brain's filter, right?
It is.
It is the network of interacting brain regions responsible for your sense of ego, your autobiographical memory, and your perception of linear time.
Yes, in fact.
It's the mechanism that ensures you know your name, that you know yesterday happened before today, and that you need to go to work tomorrow.
And it developed evolutionarily to keep us functional. Because if you were constantly overwhelmed by the infinite quantum beauty of a leaf, you would be eaten by a predator.
Right. You just stand there staring at it.
Exactly. So the DMN acts as a temporal firewall. It severely limits the bandwidth of our consciousness. It regulates the rhythm of those quantum collapse events so that we experience reality as a slow, smooth, linear progression of seconds and minutes.
But as the cellular environment begins to fail, as the hypoxia sets in, the ATP runs out, and catastrophic forced decoherence threatens to wipe the system, The brain knows the temporal firewall is now a liability.
Right, so it initiates the emergency protocol. It releases the endogenous DMT floods specifically to suppress the default mode network.
To literally tear down the firewall.
By suppressing the DMN, the DMT flood removes the temporal limits on the computational system. What's fascinating here is that it dramatically increases the density of quantum collapse events per unit of external clock time.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Think about overclocking a computer processor.
Good analogy.
If you are a PC builder, you know that a motherboard comes with safety limiters. The BIOS regulates the voltage, so the CPU chip doesn't overheat and melt. It forces the computer to run at a safe linear speed.
And the DMN is the biological BIOS.
Exactly. But in this scenario, the brain knows the physical hardware is already doomed. The oxygen's gone. The ultimate thermal crash is seconds away.
There's nothing left to save.
Right, there's no biological tomorrow to save the hardware for. So it actively removes all the safety limiters. It ramps the voltage to maximum. It unleashes the absolute, full, unfiltered bandwidth of its quantum processing power.
The brain is not hallucinating. It is computing at absolute maximum throughput. It is desperately attempting to process as much quantum information as physically possible before the inevitable forced decoherence destroys the substrate entirely.
And the result of that overclocking is profound time dilation.
Yes, because time, subjectively, is just the processing of information. If your temporal firewall usually allows you to process 1 unit of information per second, a second feels like a second.
Makes sense.
But if the firewall drops and you suddenly process 1,000,000 units of information in that same external second subjectively, that second feels like 1,000,000 seconds.
Wow.
By unleashing the full bandwidth of quantum processing, the DMT protocol creates a subjective time dilation of extraordinary magnitude right as the external clock runs out.
This absolutely rewrites how we should view near-death experiences. The NDE.
It really does.
For decades, millions of people who have been clinically dead, no heartbeat, flat EEG, and then resuscitated, have reported the exact same phenomena.
The life review.
Right. They say, I experienced an entire lifetime. I had a life review where I simultaneously re-experienced every single moment of my life, not just from my perspective, but from the perspective of everyone I ever interacted with.
Incredible.
They report being bathed in a transcendent light, interacting with geometric architectural spaces, and experiencing a literal sense of eternity.
And the materialist dismisses these as the misfiring synapses of an oxygen-starved brain. But Spiral Seeker argues these reports are the phenomenological reality of an immense volume of conscious moments compressed into the final seconds of biological coherence.
It's physical.
Very physical. When an NDE survivor reports a sense of eternity, they are not speaking metaphorically. They are reporting the literal, subjective experience of maximum computational density.
The brain is literally cramming a subjective eternity into a few objective seconds. It's the ultimate data dump before the hard drive crashes.
Exactly.
It's not a movie playing before your eyes. It is the entirety of your conscious data being processed simultaneously. Because the firewall that forces time to be linear has been dissolved.
It is the ultimate crescendo of the biological machine. However, the laws of physics eventually assert themselves.
You can't outrun thermodynamics.
No, you can't. The overclocking can only last for a brief window. The ATP runs out completely. The cellular structure degrades beyond repair. The DMT protocol is just a temporary measure. Eventually, the hardware failure becomes absolute.
The hurricane finally blows the house of cards down. The final forced decoherence occurs. The physical brain is dead. Which brings us to the next critical question. The body has failed. The DMT overclocking is over. The hardware is dead. But earlier we said physics forbids the deletion of this data, so where does it physically go?
This is the juncture where the computational framework completely separates from both religious dogma and materialist deletion. What happens to the quantum information after the final decoherence? Standard quantum mechanics provides a very clear, mathematically rigorous answer based on 2 fundamental principles, unitarity and the no-deletion theorem.
Okay, let's break those down clearly because they are dense. Unitarity and no-deletion. Let's start with classical physics to show the difference.
Sure.
In classical physics, if I write my deepest secrets in a paper notebook, and then I throw that notebook into a bonfire to human eyes, that information is gone, destroyed.
But even in classical physics, technically it isn't destroyed. If you had a theoretical supercomputer, often called Laplace's diamond, that could track the exact trajectory of every single ash flake, every wisp of smoke, and every photon of heat emitted by that fire.
You can rebuild it.
Yes. You could mathematically reverse the process and reconstruct the book. The information is conserved, just transformed into heat and smoke.
But quantum information is even more robust than that.
Considerably more robust, the no-deletion theorem in quantum information theory explicitly states that given two independent unknown quantum states, it is mathematically impossible to delete one of them against the other.
Wow.
You cannot perfectly erase a quantum state. The universe simply does not have a trash bin that empties into non-existence.
And unitarity, what's that?
Unitarity dictates that the evolution of a quantum system is always reversible in time. The sum of all probabilities in a quantum system must always equal 1. Information is strictly conserved across time. A quantum state can evolve, it can entangle with other states, but the fundamental information content cannot be annihilated.
So, applying this to the death of the brain, if the data that makes up the complex computation of my consciousness cannot be deleted, where does it go when the biological error correction system completely fails?
It entangles with the surrounding environment. When the microtubular quantum states finally decohere, they violently interact with the thermal noise around them.
The heat of the room, the electromagnetic fields.
Exactly. The information disperses, it leaks out of the biological substrate, it diffuses into the quantum vacuum, entangling with the local spacetime geometry.
Spacetime geometry. We need to explain exactly what that is, which means bringing Roger Penrose back into the conversation, because Orch-OR connects deeply to theoretical astrophysics. Penrose has spent decades working on quantum gravity.
Yes. Quantum gravity is the holy grail of modern theoretical physics. We currently have two incredibly successful but incompatible models of the universe.
Right. Quantum mechanics and general relativity.
Right. Quantum mechanics describes the microscopic world atoms, electrons, quarks. General relativity, Einstein's masterpiece, describes the macroscopic world gravity, stars, galaxies, and the curvature of spacetime. But they refuse to work together.
They clash.
Violently. When you try to apply quantum mechanics to a black hole, for instance, the math breaks down into infinities.
But Penrose's radical suggestion is that consciousness itself is the bridge between these two theories.
He hypothesizes that the orchestrated objective reduction of those quantum states in your brain is actually a microscopic quantum gravity effect.
Which is mind-blowing on its own.
It is. He suggests that consciousness operates at the exact boundary where quantum mechanics meets general relativity. And the physical scale at which quantum gravity operates is the absolute smallest measurable unit in the universe. The Planck scale.
The Planck scale. We have to give the listener a sense of how unimaginably tiny this is. We're not talking about cells. We're not talking about microscopic atoms.
No. An atom is a sprawling, unfathomably massive galaxy compared to the Planck scale.
Wow.
To put it in perspective, if a single hydrogen atom were expanded to be the size of the entire observable universe, the Planck length would be roughly the size of a regular oak tree.
That is just impossible to picture.
It really is. It is the fundamental pixelated grid of reality itself. It is the geometric fabric out of which space and time are woven.
So, if conscious experience is generated by quantum gravitational collapse events at the Planck scale inside the microtubules of our brain, then when biological death occurs and the information disperses, it returns to that exact same scale.
Yes. Biological death returns the highly organized informational pattern of your consciousness directly into the Planck scale geometry of spacetime itself. The informational energy of your mind dissipates into the fundamental geometric fabric of the universe.
I want to be absolutely perfectly clear for the listener here, because this can easily start sounding like New Age mysticism. Like, oh, your energy joins the universe.
Right, which isn't what this is saying at all.
Is rigorous physics actually suggesting that the exact quantum data that makes up you is literally interwoven into the physical space around your physical body when you die?
From the perspective of quantum information theory integrated with the Orch-OR model, yes. The information embeds into the local geometry. But Spiral Seeker is very careful to clarify what this actually implies, and we must be equally precise. This is not reincarnation.
Right. You are not bouncing into a new baby's body down the hall in the maternity ward.
And it is absolutely not a traditional afterlife. You are not waking up as an intact, cohesive personality in a spiritual realm looking down on your funeral.
There's no ghost.
No ghost. It is pure, mathematically driven redistribution. Think of it like a highly encrypted, highly organized, digital file.
Okay, let's use that. A massive encrypted file.
When the biological hardware dies, it is as if that encrypted file is run through a digital shredder, and the individual bits of data, the ones and zeros, are scattered randomly across the entire hard drive of the universe.
The data is not deleted. Every single bit still exists on the hard drive.
Every bit is conserved. But the specific localized arrangement that constituted the cohesive you, the encrypted file itself, loses its coherence. You cease to exist as a unified, localized entity.
Because the scaffolding is gone.
Exactly. The data is interwoven into the background geometry of space. The signal is absolutely still there, but it is now entirely lost in the ambient noise of the universe. Without the specific biological key of your brain's error correction system, it remains unreadable background data.
The information is conserved, just infinitely distributed. It goes from being a localized program running on a wet meat computer to being ambient code in the fabric of space.
That is the physical reality of the transition. Now, whether that dispersed information can ever reconstitute into a coherent pattern again, whether the universe itself has the computational architecture to act like a search function, recompile those shredded bits, and pull that specific data back out of the noise, well, that depends entirely on the macroscopic long-term architecture of the cosmos.
Which opens the door to the final and, frankly, most mind-bending section of Spiral Seeker's entire thesis.
It's quite a leap.
It is. Because having tracked the fate of human consciousness down to the absolute microscopic, invisible Planck scale, the author forces us to zoom all the way out, to look at the macroscopic civilizational scale. And they identify a structural parallel that is just stunning.
It is a remarkable piece of lateral interdisciplinary thinking. The author connects this exact physical model of individual biological death to an astrophysics concept called the Transcension Hypothesis.
The Transcension Hypothesis. This is a proposed solution to the Fermi paradox. For a quick refresher, the Fermi paradox is the glaring contradiction between the high mathematical probability of extraterrestrial civilizations existing in a 14-billion-year-old universe and the total lack of observational evidence for any of them.
The famous question physicist Enrico Fermi asked, "Where is everybody?"
Where is everybody? We look up at the night sky with our most powerful radio telescopes. We see billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, many millions of years older than our own sun. Logically, given the time frame, the universe should be teeming with sprawling, noisy galactic empires.
We should see Dyson spheres harvesting star energy. We should hear radio chatter. But we see nothing. The universe is terrifyingly, completely silent.
And the traditional mainstream answers to the Fermi paradox are usually pretty grim. Some argue we are just incredibly rare, an absolute biological fluke, and we are entirely alone.
Or the Great Filter Theory.
Right, that every advanced civilization inevitably hits a technological wall and destroys itself with nuclear weapons or artificial intelligence before it can expand across the stars.
But the Transcension Hypothesis, proposed by systems theorist John Smart, offers a radically different, highly elegant solution based on the laws of computation.
And what does it suggest?
It suggests that our fundamental human assumption about how advanced intelligence behaves is totally flawed. We assume that as a civilization gets more advanced, it expands outward into space. It colonizes other planets, builds bigger rockets, mines entire asteroids. It gets louder, larger, and more physically expansive.
Because that's what human empires have historically done. The Roman Empire expanded outward, we conquered geography, so we naturally assume aliens want to conquer the galaxy.
Exactly. But the Transcension Hypothesis looks at the physics of computation and argues that advanced intelligence doesn't expand outward, it collapses inward. As a civilization masters quantum physics, computer science, and energy optimization, it realizes that expanding across the physical universe is thermodynamically foolish.
Take that a step further. Why is it foolish?
Well, it comes down to energy and the speed of light. Moving physical matter like giant spaceships or biological bodies across light years of space requires an absurd, catastrophic amount of energy. It is incredibly inefficient.
Right.
Furthermore, if you want to build a superintelligence, a galaxy-spanning computer network is terrible. The speed of light is the absolute speed limit of the universe. If your computer spans a solar system, it takes hours for a piece of data to travel from one side of the processor to the other.
The lag would be horrendous.
The latency makes advanced computation impossible. In physics, there's a concept called Landauer's principle, which outlines the minimum amount of energy required to process or erase a bit of information. It shows that computing is heavily dependent on temperature and distance. If you want to maximize computation, to think faster, to simulate universes, to optimize intelligence, you do not build a giant hot computer the size of a planet.
You build a tiny one.
You build a microscopically tiny, incredibly cold quantum computer at the atomic, subatomic, or eventually the Planck scale.
Because at the microscopic scale, the distance data has to travel is practically zero. The speed of thought becomes instantaneous.
Precisely. The Transcension Hypothesis suggests that advanced civilizations migrate their entire consciousness, their entire society, into increasingly dense, microscopic, hyper-efficient computational substrates. They transcend the messy, hot physical universe and move into the microscopic quantum realm.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains the Fermi paradox perfectly.
It really does.
The silence of the universe isn't an absence of life. It's just that advanced intelligence has optimized itself so perfectly that it is completely invisible to our primitive detection methods.
Yes.
We're looking up the sky searching for massive, loud radio waves and giant metal spaceships. But the aliens are existing as hyper-efficient quantum code within the background geometry of space itself.
They are there, but they have transcended our macroscopic scale. And here is where Spiral Seeker draws the direct structural parallel to biological death. Death performs the exact same operation on the individual biological organism that transcension performs on an entire civilization.
Oh, wow. Okay, let me synthesize that. Think about your own body again. Your arms, your legs, your beating heart, the 2,000 calories you have to consume every single day just to maintain a baseline temperature of 98.6 degrees.
Right.
The biological body is the individual's equivalent of a massive, clunky physical empire.
It is astronomically expensive from an energy perspective. It is thermodynamically wasteful. And in the grand scheme of the environment, it broadcasts its presence very loudly. You generate heat, you make noise, you alter your environment. It takes massive effort to maintain this biological footprint.
So when the biological substrate finally fails, when the heart stops and the house of cards falls, my consciousness doesn't fly outward into some expansive cosmic afterlife in the sky. It collapses inward.
Yes.
Just like the advanced alien civilization. The data of my mind collapses into the finest grained structure of reality. The Planck scale quantum geometry.
That is the profound symmetry of this model. If the Transcension Hypothesis is correct for macro civilizations, its individual biological analog suggests that death is not a deletion, it is a compression event.
A compression event.
It is the ultimate optimization of the individual. The mind does not go to a specific, localized somewhere out there. By embedding into the background geometry, it goes everywhere.
It goes everywhere, distributed into the quantum substrate at a resolution so incredibly fine that no macroscopic instrument, no MRI machine, no EEG, no telescope can ever detect it.
Just as no radio telescope can detect a transcended civilization that has optimized itself into a Planck-scale computational topology, the trajectory of consciousness, whether you are looking at it on the scale of an 80-year human lifespan or an 80-million-year civilizational epoch, is the exact same journey.
It's parallel.
It is a one-way migration from loud, wasteful macrobiology into quiet, infinitely dense microcomputation.
So dying is basically the ultimate act of miniaturization and efficiency. We are transcending our clunky biological meat empires and migrating our data into the fundamental source code of the universe itself.
That's beautifully put.
The body isn't a tomb. It was just a temporary, localized scaffolding required to build the initial data set. And death is simply the moment the scaffolding falls away, leaving the architectural data integrated into the environment.
Integrated, conserved, and eternal. Not as a cohesive talking personality, but as fundamental, indestructible data. It completely neutralizes the existential terror of the void. You do not become nothing. You become an integral part of the background geometry.
Let me just take a breath, because we have taken the listener on a massive, paradigm-altering journey today. Let's pull all of this together and summarize the incredible landscape we've just traversed.
It is a lot of dense physics to synthesize.
It really is. So we started by entirely dismantling the cultural false binary. We threw out the comforting religious narratives of a localized cloudy heaven, and we threw out the bleak finality of materialist oblivion.
And we replaced them with a very precise, physically grounded description.
Right. We define consciousness as a highly ordered quantum computation happening inside the microscopic microtubules of our neurons.
A delicate quantum state maintained only by the relentless biological error correction system of the living cell burning ATP.
Right. And biological death is simply the thermodynamic failure of that system. The walls fall.
Right.
We experience a catastrophic, massively parallel decoherence event.
Yes.
But right before the collapse is absolute, the brain initiates its emergency protocol, the endogenous DMT flood.
which suppresses the default mode network, dissolves the temporal firewall of linear time, and allows for a subjective eternity to be experienced in the final moments of biological hardware function. Maximum computational throughput before the hard drive crashes.
And when the crash finally happens, when the hardware goes offline, the data isn't deleted. Unitarity and the no-deletion theorem guarantee that the information is conserved. It disperses, it entangles, and it weaves itself like a shredded, encrypted file into the exact geometric fabric of spacetime at the Planck scale.
Exactly.
Death is a compression event, perfectly mirroring how advanced civilizations might transcend the physical universe by collapsing inward into microscopic computational efficiency.
It is a purely physical, computational description of the end of biological life that adheres strictly to the laws of quantum mechanics.
Which leaves us with a profound new perspective on what it means to exist. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering thought, a provocative question inspired by all this source material, but expanding into a new space for you to mull over long after this deep dive ends.
Oh, I'm curious.
If physics guarantees that the quantum information constituting your conscious experience is conserved, if your data is never created from nothing and never permanently destroyed, but only dispersed into the geometry of the universe, then the deepest question is not whether something survives. We know the data survives.
Right.
The real question is whether the universe has the computational architecture to eventually reassemble it. Think about this. What if the entire evolutionary trajectory of the cosmos, from the intense, unified heat of the Big Bang, through billions of years of expanding galaxies and cooling stars, all the way to the theoretical heat death of the universe in the unimaginable future? What if all of it is simply the universe slowly, methodically building the ultimate macroscopic recovery drive? What if the cosmos is a self-organizing system attempting to build the hardware necessary to read the Planck scale data embedded within its own fundamental fabric?
No way.
What if the ultimate purpose of the universe is to finally remember us?
That is an incredible, profound thought to end on. It takes the hard physics of information conservation and stretches it to its absolute, ultimate cosmological conclusion.
It changes everything. We started this deep dive talking about X-rays, about the comfort of clean, visible, binary lines, broken or not broken, alive or dead. But I think what Spiral Seeker has shown us is that reality doesn't operate in binary lines.
No, it really doesn't.
It operates in gradients in conservation, in incredibly dense layers of microscopic information. The X-ray machine was never broken. We were just using a macroscopic tool to look for a quantum event.
We were obsessing over the fate of the hardware when we should have been tracking the indestructible data.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the nature of your reality, keep looking past the binary, and we will see you next time.